Okay. The last video that I put out was a little different than what I usually do, so I can acknowledge that maybe you didn't see that one, so I will reiterate here, yes, it was gone a long time. Over a month to be exact. About a month and a half where it's, I know, and, back at the beginning of this year, I said I was going to do better. And I will, I am, I promise. But, the reason that I was gone for so long is I was working on something very special to me, um, that I now have to try to find someone who wants to publish it. I should tell you what it is. And I will have more to say about that when that time comes. Anyway, here today, Superman. I told you a while back that I'd be talking a lot about Superman. I didn't exactly live up to that promise. I think I did 3 videos about it, but I'm here to talk about it again because about a week or two ago, there was an announcement from James Gunn that Man of Tomorrow, a follow-up to both the Superman and Supergirl movies, is coming out in 2027. I'm excited. I'm over the moon. But something else that's coming out in 2027 is Matt Reeves' The Batman Part 2. I would like to talk about the merger bros thing, I guess. A lot of people, myself included, have been huffing hopium that James Gunn and Matt Reeves will figure out some sort of way to just fold the Robert Pattinson, Reeves version of Batman into the DCU. Just for the sake of simplifying things. And it's not even necessarily to say that it's the worst idea in the world to have 2 Batmen going on at the same time. I just think it's easier. And I want to talk a little bit about why I think it works. And first, I just want to talk about the theming of both movies. In the Batman, Bruce is unappreciative of what he's had, and he kind of holds his parents up on this pedestal, and he kind of like idolizes them in a certain way. Then he finds out over the course of the movie that his father is not who he thought he was. His father was kind of a bit of a scumbag, and the legacy that he's inherited is not exactly what he thought it was, and he then has to decide what he wants to do about it now. And he comes to appreciate Alfred for being the only father that he's ever had. Well, what does Clark go through in Superman? He's not exactly the most appreciative of John and Martha Kent. Despite loving them deeply, he still seems to treasure his Kryptonian parents, Jor-El and Lara, a bit more deeply. And he clings to the message that they left behind. He lives in a way that he thinks lines up with what they wished for him. And he finds out over the course of the movie that they are not who he thought they were. They were pretty much evil. And he has to decide what he wants to do about that, and he comes to appreciate John and Martha Kent more for what they are and what they've done for him. And Batman, in the Batman, has to learn, by virtue of inspiring a copycat who ends up being a serial killer, who had tricked himself into thinking that there were some sort of dynamic duo. He's learned that his message that he puts forth and the idea that he represents, what he stands for, isn't working. It's not saving Gotham. It's not solving more problems than it causes. It's doing the exact opposite of that. It's not helping. So he decides to be a symbol for hope rather than a symbol for fear. Superman is turned into a symbol of fear by having his name smeared by Lex Luthor. And rather than trying to prove himself or make his own case, he wins back the trust of people of Metropolis by showing them who he is. He reminds them that he is still there to help them, to protect them, to do what he'd always been doing. It's not necessarily the exact same, but their ideals and what they represent are challenged, and they rise above it anyway. So I think that there's a lot of thematic parallelness, holy shit, between Batman and Superman in these movies. And that's one of the main reasons that I think that they work. I've heard a lot of people say, well, James Gunn and Matt Reeves are so different. They make their movies so differently from one another. And I agree. I think that's good, I think Batman and Superman's worlds are supposed to be at completely different sides of the spectrum. Gotham City is this seedy, retro-looking, dark, evil city, where Metropolis is this bright, futuristic-looking, utopia of a city where all the buildings reach the sky. That sort of thing. But they find commonality anyway. They both represent hope. You know? And that's what I think is interesting about their particular dynamic and why I think it works in general. Another thing, and this is something that I talked about in my video specifically about the Batman Part 2, I'm concerned about the trend that we've had of trying to make Batman more and more grounded and more realistic. It's interesting for a little while, it's kind of cool, I guess. But the fact of the matter is, Batman is this straight-laced, straight-edged, dark, broody, imposing figure who also fights a man made of clay, and a guy who got a skin disease that made him look like a crocodile, and a grown woman who's stuck in a body the size of a doll, and a woman who can control plants, and a guy who wears a freezer, and a man who turned himself into a bat. That's the world Batman lives in because he's from a comic book. It would be one thing if that wasn't part of the character source material. Like, you want to look at another more grounded, more realistic superhero or vigilante, we could look at the Punisher. He doesn't fight stuff like that, so obviously you're not going to put that in the Punisher TV show or in Punisher Warzone or anything like that. But Batman does deal with this kind of stuff all the time. It's part of the mythos, it's part of the world that Batman comes from. And I feel like we're betraying that when we only hone in on one aspect of the character. And it's unfortunate to say, but it's like the Ben Affleck version of the character, with the exception of killing people all the time, is the most accurate one yet, because he does live in a fantastical world. Batman lives in DC Comics, where men can run faster than the speed of light, or fly, or shapeshift, or command sea creatures. Batman is in that world, and he hangs out with these people. There's overlap. I think it does a disservice to the character to act like that's not part of it. I loved the Batman, I really do. It's my favorite Batman movie, besides Return of the Joker, Batman Beyond Return of the Joker. That's a good movie. Anyway, I just think that it's better to start trying to fold in some of those more fantastical elements so that we can capture Batman in a more three-dimensional way. And it's not too late to start doing that. We had one really grounded movie. You can still take that version of Batman and work him into a world like that. Now, I'm not speaking from the perspective of like, this is happening. I'm just trying to make a case for why it could and or should work. Another thing that I think would help with the situation is that, like I've said before in my video about the DCU, it seems like James Gunn wants a much more experienced, older version of Batman with Damian Wayne as his Robin, because he's got plans for Nightwing. Look, I love Nightwing, I really do. But if we're gonna do Nightwing correctly, we need to start with Dick Grayson being Robin, because he has to have interacted with Superman to get the name Nightwing. A lot of people don't know this, but Nightwing is a product of both Batman and Superman. That sounds like they had it together, child, but in a way I guess they sort of metaphorically did. Superman is the one that gave him the name Nightwing, if you didn't know. And he's kind of the midpoint between those two mentors that he had. And I think that we're losing, again, a lot of what makes the character who he is if we skip over all that just to do our Teen Titans movie. Pardon the interruption, it's your boy Toxic Boyo, and I wanted to take a brief moment to let you know about the Toxic Touch Productions Patreon. I'm not currently monetized on YouTube, but I still want to bring you the best content that I possibly can. I want to make those videos that you love, and I want them to be the best that they can be. But I need a little help. That's where you guys come in. If you want to support me directly, you can head on over to patreon.com/toxictouchproductions or click the link in the description or the pinned comment. For even just $5 a month, you can get your name included in the credits at the end of the video, gain access to exclusive channels on the Discord, and you get specialized merch at no extra cost. It only gets better as the tiers go higher. Go check it out. Thanks for listening and thanks for supporting my dreams. Now let's get back to the video. Another thing is, I find Damian Wayne to be the least interesting Robin out of the main four. There's like 15 Robins. I don't care. I have a deep affinity towards Tim Drake. He's my favorite, but I don't think we should start with him either. The main thing is that I don't want a 20-year veteran Batman and a mostly rookie Superman, because we just did that with BVS. And that's why I am happy that Superman's getting a more direct sequel before we start crossing him over with Batman. I know there were a lot of supporting heroes in Superman, but that's the thing. They were supporting. You know, Mr. Terrific closed the rift, sure, but Superman is the one that stopped the Engineer, Lex, and Ultraman. And, you know, Hawkgirl and Green Lantern and Metamorpho kind of just helped out over at Jarhanpur. It doesn't take away from being a Superman movie. And James has said that Man of Tomorrow was not really Superman 2, but I mean, you know, I'm looking forward to it. Hopefully the name changes, because I don't really like Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow being followed up by Man of Tomorrow. It feels a little weird. Anyway, it's best to establish the characters a little bit more first. And that's why I think it's weird to do a Clayface movie before there is a Batman, but what? Yeah, I just think that it's better to have Batman and Superman be around the same level of experience. In the Batman, we were dealing with a year 2 Batman, and in Superman, we're dealing with a year 3 Superman. I think it works. I know that Robert Pattinson's a few years older, like 6 or 7 years older than David Corenswet. Nothing we can do about that. But I like I have said 45 times, I think it's better if the characters are closer in age and level of experience, so that they can actually have a true friendship, because the friendship between Batman and Superman is one of the most important in all of DC Comics. And the last reason that I want to highlight as to why the whole merger bros thing makes sense to me, at least, is just for the sake of the audience. You know, the Batman made something like $800 million, right? More successful than the Superman movie was. Not to say that the Superman movie was a failure. It's just a simple matter of transitive property that Batman is generally more popular than Superman, because Batman has had like 3 times as many movies. It's just kind of how it works. I'm glad that DC is committing to Superman, and they are fast-tracking the sequel, because the more you put him in the public eye, the better he's going to do. Like Iron Man, he didn't start off super strong, but he got there because the guy that they picked to play the role brought the character to life in a way that had never been done before. And I do think that David Corenswet is as good a pick for Superman as Robert Downey Jr. was for Iron Man, and I will not be arguing that with anybody. But the point that I'm trying to make is that it's easier to use an established version of a character to bridge the gap. When it came to Man of Steel 2, Warner had considered using the Christian Bale version of Batman as the main Batman for the DCEU, but they decided against it because it didn't work and it clashed too. And the character had retired. We don't necessarily have to deal with too much of that here, but I do think it's going to be a lot easier on the general public if there are not 2 versions of Batman at the same time. Now, you could counter that with saying, well, there's 2 versions of Spider-Man going on at the same time right now. Spider-Man Brand New Day comes out in 2026, and Spider-Man Beyond the Spider-Verse comes out in 2027. 2 Spider-Man movies, but they're very clearly distinct from one another, because one is Peter Parker, the other is Miles Morales, one's live action, and the other is 3D animation. You know, it's easy at a glance to tell the difference. And even if you give the DCU Batman the current Jorge Jimenez costume where it's gray and blue, which I think is beautiful. I love it. Even if you were to give him that suit in contrast to Robert Pattinson's gray and black, your average moviegoer would not understand why there's two different Batman movies. You know, and it's not even about canonicity. It's not about any of that. It's about the fact that movies are expensive to go to now, and you're trying to get people to come and see the same thing twice. Now, I know, and you know, that the DCU Batman is probably going to have a very different tone to the Matt Reeves Batman, or at least that would help in differentiating the two, but your average person's not going to be able to tell the difference. It's just Batman. You'll be like, well, wasn't there just a Batman movie last year? Assuming that Brave and the Bold comes out in 2028 or something, right? That's 3 years from now. We still don't have a writer or an actor. I think we've still got a director. We've still got a title. But assuming that that movie somehow manages to come out in 2028, people are going to be confused because there was just a Batman movie the year before. But it has nothing to do with this one for some. You know? I think, and I'm not saying that to say that either movie would flop, but I'm saying they're going to hurt each other. You don't want to cannibalize your own returns like that. To put it in a video game terms, look at like Capcom, right? How many fighting game franchises have they had running at the same time? You know, they had Darkstalkers and Street Fighter and Marvel vs. Capcom and Rival Schools and freaking whatever else, Power Stone. You know, and at a certain point, you're just diminishing your own returns by saturating the market yourself. How many Guitar Hero games was Activision putting out all at the same time? There's like, or Lego games. It's like there's like 3 of these things coming out all the time. Not to say that I think that it's going to be that kind of output with Batman, but something else that I think is going to hurt the DCU is James Gunn's commitment to everything being canon. Because that's something that's hurting Marvel right now. And I think that if Superman shows up in a video game and in a cartoon, that those two things are now required reading to understand the next Superman movie, I think that's a bad idea. And that problem only gets worse when you start having multiple versions of a character at the same time, because people that are not in the know are going to start thinking that it's all connected, that it's all canon, that it's all required reading, when it's not. Going to create needless confusion, and I just don't think it's a good idea. The defense rests, I guess. That's the long and short of why I think holding Robert Pattinson in would be the right decision going. Don't have to agree, but please do be nice. What do you think? Whatever it is, whatever you know, comment below. Whatever it is, whatever. Well, yo, what's my outro? Anyway, I'm out of here.